The demand from the flight attendants hit Marissa like a cold wave. "We need you to move from your seat," they said, and for a split second, she froze. Her fingers tightened around her boarding pass, and the truth became clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was blatant discrimination. She had worked tirelessly, juggling long nights at the office to afford the extra luxury of this seat. And now, they were asking her to give it up to a businessman who seemed to believe he had the right to it. "I bought this seat like everyone else," Marissa thought, her heart racing. With a sharp breath, she made a decision that would ignite a conversation across the country. Without hesitation, her voice rang out with a calm, yet unwavering resolve. "I'm not moving." As tension filled the cabin, Marissa remained composed while the flight attendant's tone grew more and more insistent. But in her mind, this wasn't about just the seat. It was about the countless moments in her life when her worth was diminished. She had long faced subtle expectations to accept unequal treatment. The attendant's words grew sharper. "I'm sorry, but we have another passenger who needs to be seated." Marissa looked up to see a well-dressed man standing nearby. His face displayed an unmistakable mix of impatience and entitlement. In that brief moment, everything fell into place. This wasn't about logistics. It was about who deserved comfort and dignity. "I paid for this seat," Marissa said, her voice still calm, but with unmistakable firmness. "Unless there's a legitimate reason, I'm not moving." Around them, passengers began to take notice. Some looked away, unable to bear the uncomfortable exchange, while others quietly observed, and a few even nodded in support. The flight attendant's next comment made Marissa's suspicions clear. "It's just a seat," the attendant remarked dismissively. "Why make this a big issue?" The phrase, "just a seat," echoed in Marissa's mind. Over the years, she had heard similar remarks in different forms. "It's just a comment. It's just a procedure. It's just the way things are." These words were designed to silence her, to make her question whether she had the right to demand respect. When the supervisor arrived, his demeanor exuded an air of condescension. "We'd really appreciate your cooperation," he said, addressing her as if she were a child. He continued, "The other passenger has a tight schedule." "So do I," Marissa countered coolly. "That's why I paid extra for this seat." The supervisor's smile wavered, and his voice grew sterner. "If you continue to refuse, we'll need to involve airport security." The threat was clear. It was a common tactic to silence those who dared to stand their ground. But Marissa wasn't intimidated. In fact, she was ready for it. "I'd welcome that," she replied steadily. "I want them to record that I'm being removed from a seat I legally paid for." What could have been just a minor confrontation quickly transformed into a national issue. As word spread, something unexpected happened. Passengers around Marissa began to speak out. "This doesn't feel right," a woman across the aisle said. "If you want a VIP seat, he should have paid for it too," a young man added from behind. The businessman, now clearly irritated, muttered under his breath about the delays and difficulties, but his complaints only made the situation more absurd. Why was Marissa's time less important? Why was her comfort expendable, while his was prioritized? After a tense few minutes, the crew finally gave up. Marissa stayed in her seat, but the victory felt hollow. The emotional toll of the incident would stay with her long after the plane touched down. Upon arrival, Marissa didn't simply let the matter go. She found a quiet corner in the airport and made a phone call to the airline's corporate office. The representative on the other end offered an insincere apology, but Marissa wasn't interested in hollow words. "I need to speak to someone in charge," she insisted. "This isn't about customer service. This is about discrimination." When the representative tried to placate her with vague promises, Marissa cut to the chase. "If I don't hear a real response within 48 hours, I'm taking this to the public." That evening, Marissa wrote a detailed account of her experience and posted it online. She wasn't seeking sympathy. She was demanding accountability. She ended her post with a powerful statement. "This is the reality for Black travelers, even when we pay for the space we occupy. This needs to end." The response was immediate. Within hours, thousands shared her story. Comments flooded in from people who had faced similar treatment, not just on planes, but in other public spaces, hotels, restaurants, and more. Hashtags like hashtag traveling while black and hashtag flying while black quickly began trending. News outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, Marissa was at the center of a national dialogue about race and discrimination in travel. The airline's initial response was predictable, an impersonal statement of regret, without any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But this only fueled public outrage. People dissected each word, calling out the company's failure to address the true issue. Under pressure, the airline announced an internal investigation, but skepticism remained. Previous cases have been brushed aside with promises of sensitivity training that never seemed to produce any real change. Marissa's approach, however, was different. She wasn't just talking about her experience, she was exposing a broader problem. This isn't about one employee or one supervisor, she explained during an interview. It's about a culture that allows discrimination to thrive. Behind closed doors, executives scrambled to contain the crisis. Social media data showed sentiment against the airline plummeting, boycott movements gained strength, and investors became increasingly concerned. The investigation unearthed troubling truths. Several complaints had been made against the staff involved, but they were all dismissed with little investigation. Training efforts were inconsistent, and there was no real accountability for discriminatory actions. Faced with mounting evidence, the airline took drastic action. The flight attendant and supervisor were fired. But Marissa was clear, firing individuals wasn't enough. Replacing staff without addressing the root causes is just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger issue, she said at a press conference. Real change requires a system-wide overhaul. The airline, now under intense scrutiny, announced a series of sweeping changes. They implemented mandatory bias training for all employees, created an independent oversight board to handle discrimination complaints, and launched a new passenger rights policy to ensure fair treatment for all. These reforms sparked a ripple effect across the travel industry. Other airlines reviewed their policies, eager to avoid a similar public relations disaster. Advocacy groups took advantage of the moment to push for new federal regulations requiring anti-discrimination measures across all airlines. Marissa herself testified before Congress, sharing her experience. "I didn't refuse to give up my seat just for myself," she said. "I did it for everyone who has ever been made to feel less than." Marissa's courage turned her into a leading voice for fairness. She teamed up with civil rights groups to launch Claim Your Space, a campaign empowering people to report and act against discrimination through workshops, guides, and a mobile app. Her book, Seats of Power, became a bestseller and was included in corporate ethics programs. The airline reforms weren't just symbolic. They led to the reopening of past cases and recognition for mistreated customers. A scholarship fund for underrepresented groups in aviation also created pathways for diverse leadership. Though the changes were rewarding, Marissa felt the emotional weight of becoming a symbol of resistance. She sometimes wondered if it was worth it, until she received messages like one that read, "Because of you, I found my voice." The real victory wasn't in the reforms, but in the people now standing up for their dignity. At a civil rights event, Marissa said, "Change doesn't come from waiting for the right policies. It comes from ordinary people choosing to say no more when faced with injustice." The crowd applauded, but Marissa knew true change comes from action, not applause. Today, when Marissa boards a flight, she notices subtle differences: more diverse crew members, clearer passenger rights signage, and an overall shift in how people of all backgrounds are treated. These changes weren't coincidences. They were the ripple effects of one woman's courage.